Good morning. Please stand up. In front of me, I see a group of people who, in their 16, 17, 18 years on this planet, have achieved some brilliant things, and who, all of whom are destined for greatness. Now can I ask you to sit down, unless you have blue eyes. If you have blue eyes, stand up. If you have blue eyes, please forget what I've just said. Please forget about greatness and the taking pride, achievements, etc. I'm afraid that we just don't need that. Sit down. Now, does that seem at all fair, what I've just done? Having your achievements removed from you because of something that's out of your control. Now, the gentleman in the centre of the screen here faced a similar situation in his life. He was stripped of his achievements, his excellent achievements, based on one fact that was completely out of his control. He was gay. Now, you may recognise the person in the centre of the screen. This is Alan Turing. You may have heard about him in your computer science lessons. He was born in 1912 and sadly died quite early in 1954. This is quite a simplistic explanation of what he did, but essentially he created machines that help crack the Enigma code and laying the foundations for modern computers and artificial intelligence. In 1952, however, after all of the excellent work he'd undertaken during the Second World War, he was convicted for having a relationship with a man. Now, back then, if you were convicted of this, you were given the option of either you go to prison for your crime, or you undergo medical treatment for this, which was designed to take away any romantic desires that you had towards the same sex. As a result of this, he lost his job and therefore stripped of all of his great achievements and everything that he'd done. Sadly, following this, in the same year in 1952, Alan Turing allegedly took his own life. He was found with an apple containing cyanide next to him. Now here on the screen, these three people for me are what I would consider LGBTQ+ pioneers, if you will. They've all somehow done something important in either the LGBT community or within their field of work. The next person I want to talk about is someone called April Ashley, who died in 2021 after a life of significant benefit to transgender people. Now in 1960, April Ashley, at the age of 25, was one of the first British people to undergo gender reassignment surgery, all the way in Casablanca in Morocco. It couldn't be performed here in the UK. After this surgery, all of her hair fell out and she endured significant pain, but the operation was a success. It actually took 7 hours to complete this. After she returned to Britain, she began a very successful career as a model in the fashion world. She appeared in British Vogue, for which she was photographed by David Bailey, a leading photographer at the time, and won a small role in the 1962 film The Road to Hong Kong, which starred Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. However, a year later in 1961, a friend sold her story to the media, and Sunday people outed April Ashley as a trans woman. She became a centre of attention and scandal, and her film credit was dropped as a result of this. Fortunately, in 2012, the excellent work that she'd done for transgender people was finally recognised when she received an MBE for her services to transgender equality. My third person I want to talk about today is someone called Lady Phil. Their name is Phil Opoku Gima, who was born in 1974 and founded UK Black Pride, which promotes unity and cooperation among all people of African, Asian, Caribbean, Middle Eastern and Latin American descent, as well as their friends and families who identify as LGBTQ+. She's also the co-editor of an anthology of writings by LGBT women of African Caribbean descent with a connection to the UK called Sister. In a recent interview with British Vogue, she was asked, "What makes you proud?" First of all, she said, "Oh, helping ordinary people was what made her proud." And second of all, she said that she was extremely proud of the work she'd done with refugees, with migrants and asylum seekers who'd come to the UK to free themselves of persecution in countries where sadly this is still illegal. Now here in the UK we have a long timeline, we have a long history of LGBTQ rights evolving, all the way since 1500, at the time of Henry VIII, when he outlawed homosexuality. And this was outlawed until 1967, when the Sexual Offences Act was introduced in the UK. It took 10 years for this law to come into effect. However, this act permitted homosexual acts between two consenting adults over the age of 21. Now, back then, the age of consent for heterosexual people was 16, and this did not become equal until 2001. So while this act was a considerable milestone for LGBT people, it was far from being equal for LGBT people. In 1972, the first Pride Parade was held in London, and then the next significant milestone following that was in 1988, when something called Section 28 was introduced. Now, Section 28 of the Local Government Act banned local authorities and schools from promoting homosexuality, and back at this time, homosexuality incorporated the entire LGBTQ+ group. So this has deprived generations of LGBT pupils the chance of seeing people like them in books, in plays, in leaflets, or films at their schools. Teachers weren't allowed to teach about same-sex relationships, and anyone who broke this law could face disciplinary action, would be sacked from their job. In the backdrop of all of this was, of course, the HIV/AIDS crisis, the first case of which was found in the UK in 1981. And when this first appeared, this was known as a gay cancer when it first appeared. Slowly, authorities began to realise that this could affect anybody. But to then introduce this in 1988 was a massive step back for the LGBTQ+ community. In 2000, the military ban on homosexual men was ended, and Section 28 existed in British schools until 2003, except in Scotland, where it ended in the year 2000. So from 1988 to 2003, it was illegal to talk about homosexuality or anything LGBTQ+ in schools in the UK. It's a long time. In 2005, civil partnerships were introduced for same-sex couples, not still guaranteeing, though, the right to full marriage equality. In 2010, an incredibly important act for LGBT people was finally introduced, the Equality Act, which protects people with protected characteristics from discrimination in the workplace and also in wider society. Now, protected characteristics include age, disability, sex, gender reassignment, sexual orientation, marriage, and civil partnership, pregnancy, race, religion, or belief. So, for instance, if someone is not hired for a job based on their sexuality, the employer would be in breach of the Equality Act and would be breaking the law. So this was a massive way in which LGBTQ+ people were further protected by the law. Then in 2014, marriage for same-sex couples was introduced in England, Scotland, and Wales. However, this was not introduced in Northern Ireland until 2021. In 2017, the Alan Turing Law was introduced. The Anti-Turing Law was designed to pardon anyone convicted prior to 1967 of crimes relating to homosexuality. That included cautions, that included being sent to prison. Any crime that anyone was convicted of prior to 1967, people were pardoned, including Anti-Turing. In 2020, same-sex marriage was introduced in Northern Ireland. And finally, in 2021, the government pledged to end conversion therapy. However, at this time, they did not pledge to end conversion therapy for transgender people. And so there is still some way to go. Now, you might ask, why do we celebrate LGBTQ plus history? I've just shown you a number of ways in which LGBTQ plus rights have evolved over the last 60, 70 years. And you're right, it's an excellent opportunity to celebrate the progress that we've made in recent years. But there is still some way to go. In the world, there are still 69 countries where it's illegal to be LGBTQ+. And here in the UK, there's still some work to do. For example, ending conversion therapy for transgender people. And also, there's still some work to be done on for non-binary people as well, as Jude discussed at the talk for Sixth Form 2 weeks ago. Now, in terms of what we're doing here at school to celebrate this, we're doing we have a range of activities. So, for instance, in a moment I'm going to talk to you about Photography Week, which starts next week. We are going to have a film week on the week commencing 20th February. We are going to do Case Day next week. A non-uniform day on the 23rd of February. You may or may not have noticed the rainbow steps at the front of the school. We're going to have a lights night, as you like this, on the board, on Friday the 23rd of February. And finally, and also, you'll be able to purchase various LGBTQ+ badges, wristbands, stationery, and laces on sale throughout the month of reception and student reception. And a percentage of these proceeds will go to a charity called the NOTS LGBTQ+ Network. Now, the charity, one last thing. You might have noticed around the school as well a number of posters that have been put up within departments promoting the work of LGBTQ+ individuals within the subject areas. And I'd really encourage you to take a moment to read some of those if you can. In terms of the charity we're supporting, so this is the NOTS LGBT+ Network, which is the same charity that we supported in 2022. In terms of what they do, they are a network which creates a safe space for people looking for information, advice, and help relating to LGBT+ issues, including sexuality, gender identity, sexual health, and emotional well-being. Since 1975, they've been able to help over 80,000 people and partnered with more than 100 groups and organisations across Nottinghamshire to raise awareness of LGBT+ issues. Now, the photography competition that we are starting next week, I have left deliberately quite vague, because what I would like is for you to take a photo which somehow captures diversity. Now, diversity incorporates so much, so really there is so much that you could take a photograph of. If you wish to take part, submit your photo to me by next Friday. There are prizes available, and if you are looking to improve your knowledge of special effects and editing, go to Photography Club next week. Now, I want to end on this. What does it mean to be an LGBTQ+ ally? You might say to yourself, well, that's just being a good friend. Well, it is being a good friend, being kind, being empathetic, listening. But there are a few extra things to just bear in mind. Actively listening to LGBTQ+ friends. Well, what does actively listening mean? Actively listening is different to simply listening. It's taking on board what someone's saying, putting yourself into their shoes, showing empathy, and almost taking on their struggle as if it were your own. What do you do in that situation? So thinking about what you're hearing. Obviously, empathy is a massive part of actively listening to someone. Educate yourself on LGBTQ plus issues. There are plenty of posters around the school, have a read of them. There are plenty of books in the library, have a read. Think about the language that you use when you speak to LGBTQ plus people. Just be mindful of what it is that you say. And finally, I want to think about this idea of the difference between not being homophobic, not being transphobic, and being anti-homophobic, being anti-transphobic. And now, the most important, the best way in which you can do that is to challenge any homophobic or transphobic behaviour, language, and make sure you report it. And that is the main difference in being not homophobic, not transphobic, and being anti-homophobic, being anti-homophobic, being anti-transphobic. Thank you very much.